3 stones, 1 strop, and that's all it takes for a sharp edge. Today's video is all about the premium silver sharpening stones. UKSG Tools sent them to me for testing, and yes, they ship worldwide. But this is not a sponsored review. If I didn't believe in the product, I wouldn't be talking about it. And I have to say, the special hybrid bonding they use really caught me off guard. After the first few sessions, I was so curious that I went out and bought the 550 vitrified to compare. That one will be featured in another video. This time we're focusing only on the silver series. I'll explain why the bonding is so special, how I use these stones in my sharpening routine, and which grits I think are worth paying close attention to. You can technically sharpen any steel with diamonds or CBN, but the bonding plays a huge role in how the stone works and how it interacts with your steel. This is not just about the scratch pattern or wear resistance. To show you how these stones perform in practice, I'll sharpen 2 knives with very different steels. First, the Kershaw Iridium and D2 steel. Not the most exciting steel on paper, but perfect for demonstrating and explaining how this bonding type is structured and why it works so well, especially on steels with a softer matrix and an uneven, larger carbide structure. I'll use the full 3-stone progression for the steel, and of course I'll include microscope footage so you can clearly see the scratch pattern. After sharpening the D2 blade and explaining the bonding type along with its benefits, we will move on to the WE Knife Inmate in CPM 20CV. This is a high-alloy powder metallurgy steel with a fine carbide structure, and for those who do not know, it is essentially M390 steel from a different manufacturer. For this knife, we will take a slightly different approach, and I will explain exactly why. And no, it's not an illusion. I really did buy 3 inmates. 1 for work, since I am in tunnel construction where the environment is rough with lots of dust and dirt. The second one is for EDC off the job. And the third, well, I couldn't decide between the DLC and the black and blue version, so I got both. Let's just say knife addiction is real. The Inmate was designed by Jared from Neves Knives. If you want to deep dive into the knife itself, check out his channel. But let me just say, I love this knife. And of course, every inmate needs a warden. That will be the Kunwu Stiffy D, a KnifeStock exclusive, limited to just 50 pieces, made from Venatus 4 extra steel. Is that combo a bit overkill for a construction site? Probably. Do I care? Absolutely not. I will also show you the Woburn G5 flashlight, which is already part of my EDC and very useful for checking the burr during sharpening. They also sent me another one that is still under wraps until its release in September. Trust me, it's a beast and built for serious use. I will link everything I use in the video description. Some of the links also support the channel if you use them. So let's stop talking and get into it. I hope your beer isn't empty yet because this is where it gets fun. We'll skip the part about clamping and aligning the knife, but once again the factory grind is a disgrace. On this side we are hitting the grind fairly well at 24 degrees, and although I've had this knife for quite a while, I have never sharpened it before. The show side, however, is completely off. That's not a problem though. The 160 grit stone takes care of it quickly. To demonstrate how well this stone works as a reprofiling stone, I'll lower the angle from 24 degrees to 19 degrees per side. I could go even lower, but with D2 I usually stop here. In my experience, 19 degrees is about as low as I go while still keeping the edge functional. Since D2 struggles to hold more acute angles, I am intentionally using the stones dry in this test, because I know this is an important point for many of you, and often the preferred working method. Those who follow my videos know that I am a strong advocate for high-quality sharpening oil, and that will not change. I have tested the stones dry with soapy water and with oil, and thanks to the optimized surface structure, I have achieved consistently excellent results in all cases. Most people might think that for a significant angle change, it would be better to use an 80 or 100 grit electroplated stone to save time. But even though this is a 160 grit, it works surprisingly fast. The reason is a very smart design choice. There are basically 2 approaches. You can take an extremely coarse stone, remove steel very aggressively, and then spend a lot of time cleaning up deep scratches and fixing edge damage. Or you can do what the silver stones do. Use a grit that is not overly coarse, but greatly increase the concentration of CBN particles. This gives you a very fast yet controlled reprofiling stone that does not work unnecessarily aggressively. Fast material removal does not automatically mean aggressive material removal. I want a stone that works efficiently, but is not overly harsh on the steel. This is where the silver really shines. The high and evenly distributed concentration of CBN particles provides consistent cutting performance. And so far, I have not noticed any significant grit contamination. That is a big advantage because it prevents random deep scratches that would require extra work with the 325 stone. This saves time and preserves steel on the blade. A win-win situation. In my opinion, the jump between the 3 grits in this set is not too far. Thanks to their higher concentration, it works perfectly. What makes these stones particularly interesting is their hybrid bond. I've already explained the basic principle using a hard bond for softer steels and a soft bond for harder steels in my 154 cm sharpening video. Here's a quick recap. When sharpening softer steel, each diamond particle in the bond is subjected to higher forces because it penetrates deeper into the steel. This puts greater stress on the bond. Hard bonds have advantages here, especially with steels that have a softer matrix and larger hard carbides. The hard wear-resistant surface holds the diamonds securely so they are not pulled out as easily as with electroplated stones. At the same time, the diamonds can protrude further before breaking out of the bond. This results in faster material removal, while also extending the stone's working life. And that is only part of the advantage when it comes to the interaction between a hard bond and softer steels. We will not go into resin-bonded stones and their working behavior or advantages on harder steels here. However, anyone who has worked with metal-bonded stones knows their biggest drawback: burr removal. This bond type is generally less effective at minimizing the burr, and you can often reach a point where the burr no longer reduces or even starts to increase again. This can happen not only with coarse stones, but also with finer grits in the same bond type. Of course, the heat treatment of the steel remains the critical factor, but many experienced sharpeners know exactly what I am talking about. This is where the silver stones stand out. They do not use a pure metal bond, but a well-thought-out hybrid of metal and vitrified bonding. Vitrified is not a material name. It is a manufacturing process in which ceramic bonding agents are sintered at very high temperatures to form a glassy, extremely strong structure. This structure is dimensionally stable and highly wear-resistant, and it can be engineered with pores. That is especially beneficial on the 160 and 325 because it helps prevent the stones from clogging. And when people hear the word ceramic, they often think of burr removal, and in this case that is true. The ceramic component in the hybrid bond makes burr minimization easier and more consistent. It helps remove it in a more controlled way. But to be clear, these stones will not make the burr disappear by magic. The heat treatment of the steel remains a critical factor, and there are steels where, even with the best bond, a stubborn burr can remain. In such cases, you need alternative deburring techniques, and in rare extreme cases, it might not be possible at all, although that is the exception. And if you have a resin-bonded stone in the 3000 grit range, give that a try. That usually does the trick. But the difference compared to pure metal-bonded stones is noticeable, especially on the 650 grit stone. This is where the hybrid bond truly shows its strength, delivering a cleaner apex in the finishing stage and burr removal. The two coarser stones, the 160 and the 325, are pure workhorses. At these grits, the focus is on efficient material removal and preparing the edge for the finer stages, and they both perform exceptionally well. And both of them just keep working great for a very long time. I only gave them a quick touch-up with a Nagura stone after about 9 or 10 knives, just to knock down the bond a bit and keep them flat. But I also tested giving them just a very light touch-up with some sick powder on a glass plate. And I can tell you, they cut even faster after that. I wouldn't recommend doing this all the time though, because if you are not careful, you can remove more material than necessary. And why I value the 325 just as much as the 160 as my starting stone is something I'll explain once we start sharpening the Inmate. Before we move on to that, let's take a look at the first results and put the sharpness to the test. Now, let's move on to the Inmate. I have tested several clamping positions for this knife, and in the end, this one gave me the best results. If you try it this way, make sure to protect the handle well with tape and work carefully around the heel area. That will help you avoid any scratches. The current angle is 19 degrees, and we will now bring it down to 17 degrees per side. I'm starting intentionally with a 325 silver stone, and that choice has an important reason that many people underestimate. When sharpening a steel with a high content of hard carbides, such as vanadium carbides that most of you are familiar with, there is a potential problem. If you start with a stone that is too coarse, you can cause what is known as carbide fracturing. This means that the extremely hard carbides, which are embedded in the steel matrix, develop micro cracks or small breaks at their edges under the mechanical forces of sharpening. They are not necessarily torn out completely, but their structure becomes weakened. This directly reduces apex stability and edge retention. There are well-documented tests showing that these microcracks can reduce edge retention by well over 50%. As an extreme example, steels like Maxmet, Rex 121, or CPM 15V often suffer from chipping issues. Of course, their extreme hardness is part of the reason. But if they are sharpened incorrectly without taking carbide fracturing into account, the edge starts out with a compromised microstructure. These damages are invisible to the naked eye, but make the edge much more likely to chip in use. The second factor is the cutting technique, since these steels are highly sensitive to any lateral pressure. Once you reach around 300 grit and finer, the risk of carbide fracturing is greatly reduced. This is exactly why the 325 is so important for me. It allows me to work very quickly and efficiently, even on steels with a high carbide volume, while keeping that risk to a minimum. In general, with such steels, you should always work carefully and apply as little pressure as possible. When it comes to the extreme cases, and since I also own and absolutely love the complete alpha set, there will of course always be steels that I will sharpen exclusively with those stones. I just know that not everyone is as obsessed with sharpening as I am, but I wanted to mention it briefly. You might think this is not very relevant since the knife will be stressed in use anyway. The point is that sharpening can put more stress on the steel than actual cutting does. During sharpening, the edge is repeatedly stressed in a direction we usually try to avoid when cutting. If we can avoid weakening the edge during sharpening, we can get significantly better performance from the steel. This is why the 325 is just as important to me as the 160 as a starting stone. The first stone you use lays the foundation for the sharpness. Depending on the steel and the condition of the edge, I have two perfectly working starting stones, and both are essential for my work. And please do me a favor and don't start overthinking the whole process, whether you've just started sharpening or you've been doing it for years. If you're having fun, that's what matters most. I'm just the kind of person who likes to overthink every little aspect. But trust me, in the end, the most important thing is that you enjoy yourself and are happy with the results you get. Many of you already know the set that Jared put together: the 160 silver, the 285, and the 550 vitrified. It is an excellent setup, and for about 90% of you, probably the best performance to price ratio you can get at a very high level. That being said, in my own workflow, I prefer the 325 silver over the 285 vitrified. Everyone sharpens differently, and everyone has their own opinion on what works best. This is simply my preference based on my sharpening style and the steels I work with most often. The set Jared put together is still a great choice, but not everyone has exactly the same process or priorities when sharpening. Often it is not about which stone is better overall, but about which one works better for you or for me. And yes, I am saying this because I can already imagine a few people getting worked up over me preferring the 325 silver. But that is fine. I am not here to tell you what you want to hear. I am here to share my honest opinion, and that is exactly what I'm doing. Now, I think it is time to talk about the 650 silver. The reason I really like this stone is because I do not only sharpen my own knives, but also a large number of knives for friends and family. These are often inexpensive household knives made from relatively soft steels, and the bonding of the silver stones works perfectly for them. For me, that is a huge long-term advantage because with this 3-stone setup and a leather strop, I can achieve an excellent working edge very quickly, efficiently, and with consistent results. I know many of you watch my videos simply for entertainment, which makes me very happy. Others are thinking about buying these stones. The thing with recommendations is that I do not know your budget, the steels you mainly sharpen, the stones you already own, or your preferred sharpening style. These are all key factors in choosing the right stones. All I can do is share my experiences with these stones, show you how I use them, and how I like to combine them. Some of you may work similarly to me, others very differently. You have seen in the video how these stones perform, and all 3 silver stones, as well as the 550 vitrified, can deliver excellent results. In the end, I would say choose your combination based on your budget and your working style. I am not here to sell you anything. I simply love sharpening, and I'm admittedly a little obsessed with it. I own far too many stones, and it is just like with knives. At some point, it becomes more of a collection habit than a necessity. Let's be honest, we would only need one knife, but who here actually owns just one? I have close to 60 knives at the moment, most of them far from budget models, and the number is still growing. So if you are not sure which stones to choose, feel free to ask me in the comments. I am always happy to help, and I really appreciate every comment and a like on the video. Your feedback means a lot to me and helps me keep improving these videos. Otherwise, I have no idea if anyone out there is actually interested, and I end up just having long conversations with my sharpening stones. And trust me, they are terrible at small talk. Anyway, speaking of sharpening, the inmate is now fully finished, the burr has been removed, and it is time to take a look at the visual result and see just how sharp we have managed to get it. I'd say the inmate is definitely ready for work again. And if you want to squeeze out a little more after the 650, you can go down to a 3 or 1 micron strop. Personally, I just like to keep it fast and simple on my working knife. The result on D2 is also really solid, although I wasn't expecting such a poor factory grind to begin with. But let's be honest, how crazy is that 160 silver? It's an absolute beast. It keeps impressing me every single time, and I can highly recommend it. So, stay tuned for the upcoming video on the 550 vitrified stone, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. But I think before that, we need to test a perfect mirror finish on my Stiffy D. And for everyone who watched the video until now, here's a little insider. I'll just say K4. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.